Welcome to Positive Filter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and people. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Filter. Today, I'm joined by a special guest. Well, everyone's a special guest because they join me on my show. I'm joined by Professor Jim Trefil. I want to pronounce that correctly. Trefil. And so I will give a little explanation why I asked Jim to be on my show, and then I'll love him to introduce himself. But as you know, for those, I work at George Mason University, and it's the 50th anniversary of our institution. And I was looking at videos and I came across Jim's video where it was a tribute video to his time at Mason. And I had to reach out to him. I said, wow, having a legacy and a career like he had was so inspirational. I even had, tears in my eyes because it was just such a powerful video. And so I reached out to him and said, would you be a guest on my podcast to share your journey with George Mason University? So before we get started, Jim, can you give the listeners a little bit background on who you are?
Okay, I'm the Robinson Professor of Physics at George Mason University. I was born and grew up in Chicago. I got degrees from various universities. We don't have to go into that. But I joined Mason back in the 1980s. And so I've watched it grow. The way I usually describe it, Phil, is I say it was like those old Western towns you see in movies, with the unpaved street and the plank sidewalks. Yeah. It was kind of like that when I got here. And one of the things I remember is they had a little reception for new faculty. It was on the balcony of what was called the Patriot Center at that time. Now it's Eagle Bank Arena. And there was where the Johnson Center and the Center for the Arts are now was a swamp. Okay. And they had a picture there of what it was going to look like in the future. And I remember looking at that picture and looking at the swamp and thinking, no way is this going to happen, But here we are, and it has happened.
I love it. So you're from Chicago, and take us through that journey. How'd you end up in Northern Virginia for your career, and how'd you end up at George Mason?
If you want my academic pedigree, I went to the University of Illinois, got a degree in physics and math, got a Marshall Scholarship, and went to Oxford, where I read philosophy of science and theoretical physics. Then I finished up at Stanford doing theoretical physics. And I kind of kicked around for a while, wound up at the University of Virginia. Mm-hmm. And that's where the George Mason recruiters found me.
So were you in Charlottesville and they said, hey, you're in Charlottesville. Do you want to come up to Northern Virginia? Is that
that's exactly what it was like. I got this letter from a university I'd never heard of, and there's a standard wedding dance that academics go through, hey, Mr. Professor, we got this new position. You know anybody who'd be interested? And I looked at it and I said, yeah, I know somebody who's interested in me. Because the thing about the Robinson program was, the first thing you had to do when you got here was write your job description. Oh. And I was really interested in, and still am, in explaining science to people who are not scientists, what's called scientific literacy. I think this is a really important aspect of American education, which has been largely neglected. Mm-hmm. And we don't do very well we do very well training future scientists. But we don't do very well training people who aren't going to be scientists, and just as citizens, those people need to know some things, and that's my my soapbox.
No, I love that soapbox because honestly, I'm not in the STEM field, but I know particularly as it intersects with just so much going on in the world and politics and all that, it's like there's a lot of misinformation. Because I do agree with you wholeheartedly that there is some not like illiteracy in science, right? Like you just, how to read reports or just think about science. So I think that's a great soapbox to have.
Well, we've just come through, we're still in the middle of that with the pandemic and with the vaccine hesitancy. The people are saying these weird things that as a scientist, are just impossible. But Oh, well, never mind.
No, I totally get that. So you got here and you had this opportunity. I like it now, like the swamp, and you saw this. What, besides that reception, what was some of your first instincts of seeing this growing institution? Like, did you see like the world of potential? Or you're like, this is crazy. Like, this ain't nothing. Like, what was your thoughts?
Well, George Johnson was president at the time, and he was a very dynamic kind of guy, and he was a really good recruiter. Because I can remember sitting in his office, and he says, "Look, Jim, I understand the attraction of a place like UVA, but I'll promise you, if you come to Mason, no one will ever tell you we don't do things that way." And that was it for me. I mean, I was just sold. But what I wanted to do was to try to put together in one course a basic idea. This is how the universe works. These are the basic laws of nature that operate in the universe. And so that every student who left Mason, who had taken this course, would be able to read the newspaper the day they graduate. That was my goal. And the basic thing is the central ideas of science are not, you don't need a lot of math, and they're fairly simple, but you have to see them in alert. You have to see the universe as this kind of connected thing, and these laws of nature are kind of like a skeleton that holds it all together. And I'll tell you, Phil, the first time I tried teaching that course, I wasn't sure I could do it. And I restricted the enrollment to 10 students. So I figured if it crashed and burned, it would minimize the damage. But it didn't. And between myself and now Professor Emeritus Bob Hazen, we've taught had thousands of students go through those courses.
Wow, that's like very powerful. I'm thinking about, legacy building and just the work, the sense of higher ed is that, I think what's really remarkable, with your career is that you stayed put. And so what are your thoughts to that? Like, generationally, I would assume the younger generation, we don't have that same mindset where we stay put for a substantial amount of time. People move and change places like almost every 3 years or so. But you have such a placeholder career, like that's remarkable. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my generation, which is far back 100 years ago, whatever, it was quite normal to bounce around a lot. For example, when I applied for graduate school, my advisors at Illinois said, "Do not come back here. Go someplace else. Make as many connections as you can, meet as many people as you can, form a network. Be part of a network." Mm-hmm. That was really good advice. And that was pretty standard, and I think that is kind of standard still for young academics to do that. Mm-hmm. But there comes a point where you settle down and you just want to get your work done. You don't want to be chasing jobs. You don't want to be, doing interviews and all that kind of junk. Just get the work done, do what you want to do. And one of the things I really like about Mason is a place, I forget what they call it, fail forward, I think is the term that's used, that you can try new ideas, and if they don't work, it's okay. And then you try something else, And the place has always been like that, and I think still is. I'll tell you a story about that. This was pre-internet we're talking about now, so way back in the dark ages. I wanted to talk about what we call today remote learning. And so I went to George Johnson. I said, "Look, I got this class. What I'd like to do is split it up, put them in 2 different rooms, give each room a television set, and see, let's just see what happens." And typical George response was, he says, "Sure, if it doesn't work, we can watch the Redskins games." So there was that kind of very open attitude toward change here.
I love that. Well, one thing I thought about too, and I'm hearing this from your stories, it was like the accessibility. Like you're just saying, George, like the school was that small where you could just tap into the president. It was a lot more easier to have that relationship.
Yeah. Well, George Johnson and David King, who now they are buildings, but they used to be people. basically ran the university out of their back pocket. I'll tell you a funny story. Maybe I shouldn't, but my colleague Paul D'Andrea, who is the Robinson Professor of English, now emeritus, he founded the theater of the First Amendment. He really built the theater component of our university. And when he wanted to do something, he would hide in the bushes in the morning where he knew George would be walking by and grab him on the fly and make his pitch, And so that's the way things were done those days. I remember once we had lunch with George, and he came in, he told us he was going to get rid of the geology department. And Bob Hazen, who's now Professor Emeritus, and I objected very violently to that, and we convinced him what he really needed to do was to found a Department of Planetary Science. And now we're very big in that, and we've got several different departments that deal with that. But it was like that. You could have new ideas, and you could throw them out there, and sometimes people would listen.
I mean, I love that story, and I think that's very powerful because, the innovation at Young University.
Yeah.
From your long term, do you still see that spirit, or you think that scalability that it's gotten harder, it's gotten away from that? Because that seems like really cool, where you could just hide in bushes and pop up on presidents, like I feel like you can't do that no more. So,
I wouldn't do that with Greg, but maybe somebody will take a hint from this. I don't know. Yeah. But I sort of, that's something you worry about as an institution gets older. You get kind of a little sclerotic. I really don't see that in Mason yet. I see a lot of people. I see new things being tried all the time. I mean, we've got people like Mike Summers, who's exploring Pluto in the Kuiper Belt. And there's all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of stuff going on around here. And people have ideas, and people are trying them out. And a lot of them work and some of them don't. And that's exactly how it should be.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I just think scalability, from what I understand, and I grew up in Northern Virginia, even transformed it, that this school had this certain character aspect of, accessibility. And it was like the man's man, or the common person college, where, for those that need a second chance, or those that went to community college get a chance. And so I think that's the really core part of Mason. But at the same time, as we get bigger, I think there's certain things that are transforming, right? So,
yeah, I have taught big evening classes, where we had a lot of the people coming back, and that's a different challenge because, these people they're paying the tuition themselves, right? And so they're very aware of what they're getting for their money. And so you got to be on your toes with them a little bit. But I used to love to describe this to people at 4:30 in the afternoon. The tie-dyes and the tattoos leave the university, and the high heels and business suits come in. Yeah. And we still have a certain aura of that.
So what was one of your, as you say, what was one of the coolest things that you've seen Mason transform, in a sense, like maybe a physical building that's really cool, or just a department or an institution? Like one thing that in your time was like, wow, this is crazy. This came out of Northern Virginia. This came out of George Mason.
That's there's so many things. Yeah. I guess. What I would pick, and this is just very personal, is the reception we got when we tried to do the scientific literacy courses. Now, this is something that, I think is very important. We've written a textbook which is going into its 9th edition. It's being used in hundreds of universities around the country. So it's an idea that started here, conversations between me and Bob Hazen, and now has spread around the country. And so that's a personal example of what you're talking about, but there are lots of others.
I love that.
Yeah, you see, the thing is, in the early days, we had a really hard time getting PhD programs in the sciences. because you'd go to the state council and they say, well, we want a program in physics. Well, why do you need that? We've got one at William and Mary. We've got one at Tech, And so what we had to do was find the niches where nobody was looking. And a lot of that was in computational computer work, which has now grown and taken over those fields basically. But when we started, it wasn't like that. And so we were forced to be innovative, just by the state bureaucracy.
Okay, now I got it. So I like that mindset too. I have a very chip on my shoulder kind of I'll show them attitude, and that's just who I am. I let my work do that, and when someone says I can't do something, I say okay, I take note of it, then I do it, and then I'm the type of petty that will say, show them that I did it, right? Like that. Yeah. So do you feel, and when I'm hearing this story about forced to innovate, from your earlier institutions and earlier instances in the state of Virginia, and you said bureaucracy, do you feel like that was something that Mason kind of had to address, was like this chip on your shoulder, budding university? And,
oh yeah, for sure.
Keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing. Can you share some stories of that? Like
George Johnson was very big on needling UVA, but that was part of the fastest gun in the West kind of attitude that we had. Yeah.
Can you describe, or is there any instance where that fastest gun in the West reputation eventually switched over, and then like you were in an instance where they're like, wow, that's Professor Jim from George Mason. Like it was almost like we earned respect. Did you ever get that feeling?
Yeah, I got to tell you, this is what I used to do. Every year we get this letter from the president saying all the things that have happened during the year. The letter I'm talking about. And when I first came here, I used to love to send that around to all the guys who told me I shouldn't come here. It was maybe a little nasty, but I enjoyed kind of just rubbing it in.
Oh, okay. First of all, Jim, that's my spirit animal. Like now, that's something I would do. I just probably would do it now. You do it via letter. I'd probably do it via social media.
Yeah.
I vibe with that. I think that story made me smile so much. Like, yeah, I definitely would have done that too. And so that's
well, the thing is, as a new university, when I its reputation was kind of as a commuter college. Not that we didn't have a lot of dorms. We didn't have. And George Johnson would always, people would tell him, well, you got to have a football team. He said, well, we can't have a football team until we got a medical school. And then people would say, we got to have a medical school. He said, we can't have that till we got a football team. so he would, that was his attitude, that he wanted to build the academic part of the university, which I think he did very well.
That was, from what I'm understanding is that a lot is transformed. What is one thing that you hope, as a core value or core, just what Mason's about, that you hope never changes? Like, what do you hope never, like, no matter how much we grow or how much, the 100th anniversary,
I can tell you very clearly, the thing I value most about Mason, and I've always, right from the start, is just the incredible diversity of our student body. Growing up in Chicago is a city of ethnic neighborhoods. And I used to love to walk across the Johnson Center, the food court, pre-COVID, and I hear 4 or 5 different languages being spoken at different tables. This is what it's supposed to be like. This is what a real university is. It's a world institution. And so that's something I hope never changes.
Me too. I saw someone, this is like the direct representation of Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
Like how diverse, or the DMV in general, like at large. And that was definitely something that resonates with me as well. Seeing.
Let me tell you one story to illustrate what I'm talking about. I teach a history of science course. And when we get to the contributions of the Islamic scholars to the development of science, I have them read the Rubaiyat because Omar Khayyam, who wrote the Rubaiyat, was a major mathematician. He solved the cubic equation, but he also wrote poetry. And all of these great scientists from the Islamic Golden Age were like that. This guy pioneered eye surgery, but he also was a professional lute player. It was that kind of stuff. And there was this girl in my class who actually read Farsi. And so she read the poem in the original. And then she brought in her mother, who was a doctor who has as a hobby ancient Persian poetry, and they explained the poem to us, and it's like a resource you can call on that you wouldn't have it in most universities.
I love that. I bet both the mother and the daughter felt immense pride being able to share their culture in a class.
Absolutely. And it showed. It came through. It was very clear.
So that kind of sparked my thought about you're saying diversity of students in science. And we're talking about the past. Where, if you were put on your predictive hat, where do you think Mason's lead it in the future?
Oh boy. The thing is, I think of the new center going up in Arlington, and I just can't imagine what that's going to be like in 20 years. I remember the law school used to be in a converted department store. I don't know if you knew about this, but you walked into it and there was an elevator that took you up to the second floor, as an escalator. And I tried very hard when they were designing the new law school to keep the escalator in there, but they didn't. But I thought that was, there was just this attitude that we're going to build a law school, we're going to pick something that no one else is doing, in this case, law and economics, and we're going to be the world leader in that field. And this happens all over the place at Mason. And you go to any of our campuses, you're going to find something like that going on.
So now I think at the part of the show, I lied and said that the only thing that was organized was shout-outs and plugs, but this is the part of the show I call Shot for Shot, where you get to ask me any random question. I get to ask you any random question. It has nothing to do, could be totally irrelevant. You want to go first, or I go first?
You go first. Let me think about this.
Okay, so you're a Chicago native, right?
Yeah.
So is it, are you a, Chicago sports and that's it, or you've been transplanted to the DMV so long that you switched alliances?
I'm halfway through the switch. I still go back to, look, I root for the Bears. I still go back. I'm a Cubs fan, and when I go back to Chicago, I love to go to games at Wrigley Field. But the city's changing like all cities, and what was important to me, the ethnic neighborhoods and the ethnic churches and that kind of stuff is starting to disappear a little bit. So, yeah, but I still root for the Bears.
I mean, yeah, I was about to say, you don't have any better picking the Commanders or whatever they are now. So, as a Chicago native, I wouldn't have switched either. So,
yeah. Well, I remember when one year the then Redskins were playing the Bears in the postseason, and they went around. The Post went around and interviewed all the Chicago natives about the game. And Supreme Court justices and congressmen and some pretty high up individuals, but we all felt the same way.
All right. So, what's your question for me?
Let me ask you the same question you asked me. What do you value about George Mason? What do you want not to change?
Well, what I don't want to change is the diversity as well. So I don't want to change that answer from yours. But what I really think that is the number one thing that is really drawn and been an attachment to me is that it's embedded in Northern Virginia's community. And it's, for me, it's the accessibility. Like, I really view as it's transformed to a more larger public state institution. But for me, George Mason still has this chip on his shoulder opportunity, kind of get a second chance kind of thing, right? Whether, you weren't that strong of a high school student, you had to go to Nova, and then you get yourself together at Nova and you come here and you do what you need to do, or you're an adult learner and you got that second chance where you got a whole family and you have that accessibility to come back and take classes at night. And that's the heart of it, right? Like education as being the key to people's next level of success, and that it shouldn't be like, it should be for everybody that's available.
I agree with that 100%.
And I love that because I got my master's here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I went to JMU. I love it. I ain't gonna, I still rock with them. I wish I could have a split jersey. I love my, my purple and gold, whatever, JMU. And I love that undergrad experience. But what also I loved about Mason is it gave me my career. Like, I got a master's in counseling. I was able to like really launch my career. I was able to like get an internship, and it was flexible, and it gave me a second chance because I didn't know what I wanted to do undergrad. So Mason, I really attribute Mason as an adult learner, especially the graduate programs here, as an opportunity for me to advance my career and really figure out myself. And so I think that's not just me. I'm not that only person that has come to Mason to go, advance or figure out stuff. But I know a lot of people use this as an opportunity to figure out what they want to do with themselves. So
I've had a lot of those students, and it's very rewarding because they really appreciate the older ones, really appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah. And also just they take value in it. Like, I wasn't the strongest undergrad student, but when I came here and I knew my mission, which Mason helped me, I was super serious. Like, I was getting straight A's. I was like, man, this is, so.
There you go.
So
you're the perfect example of what we're talking about.
There it is. Put me on the poster boy for Mason. But I would say though I hope that it doesn't lose that. I hope that as we grow, become scalable and become a bigger institution, that we don't lose that root of being accessible and being, for many, that second chance at new opportunities that, to get a better life for themselves or a better career for themselves. So
yeah, I agree. I would hate to see us become, what's the word that people use, selective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's ways, and I believe strategically, like you can be accessible and still have standards.
Well, look, I teach a lot in the honors college, which is it's as good as you're going to get anywhere in the country.
There it is. So there you found a solution,
Yeah.
Jim, this has been a pleasure. I'm so happy to have you on here.
Well, it's been a pleasure to me too, Phil.
As I said earlier, I am not one to sugarcoat it. Like when I saw that video, I was like, man, that's a legacy. People have names after them. And I was like, man, I don't know where I'll be. And I don't have my predictive hat, what I'll do with my career, but just the fact that Mason highlighted you and just showed that was really inspiring, and as an educator, period, like regardless of, the institution, just being able to like have a full legacy of educating people, that's pretty dope, so that was really amazing. And I'm really happy that you got an opportunity for people to see that.
It was fun. I was a little embarrassed by some of it, but it's just, what happens, Phil, is, at the end, you suddenly realize that you had a career while you're doing it. You're just working,
Okay, there it is. So you're just working, and then you're like, oh, I had a career.
That's exactly.
Oh, that's the secret. I guess that's the secret. So, Professor, this has been great. This is the part of the show where it's called Shoutouts and Plugs. Have opportunity to show love to anyone you want to show love to. And then plugs will be ways that you would like listeners to follow up with you, or things that you're working on, maybe, like that ninth edition of the book, whatever things that you want the listeners to know. And I'll put that in the show notes. So the stage is set. Shout outs and plugs.
Oh, well, okay. As you say, we're just finishing up the ninth edition of our science literacy textbook. And what's useful about it is when people say, what is scientific literacy? We can hand them the book and say, here it is. This, if you know all this stuff, you're scientifically literate. I'll just tell you what I'm working on now. I'm working on a project with National Geographic to try, I call it kind of technological awareness. If you do something like you flip a light switch and a light goes on, there's this huge technological structure out there behind the light switch that you don't see, but that eventually turns the light on. But there's a generator, there are power lines, there are transformers, all kinds of things. And we're trying to put together a book that illustrates that fact, that you start with even the very simplest things in life. Waking up in the morning and asking what time it is, and just this incredible technological structure that has to be in place before you can answer that question. So we're just getting started in that project. It'll be a couple of years before it's finished.
Like I said, any shout outs, people you want to show love to?
Can I do it for my wife?
Yes, please. Yeah, don't get in trouble, man.
My wife, Linda, who is a constant source of help and support.
I love it. There you go, man. You're a good guy. You gonna stay out of the doghouse. You did the best shout outs. Most people always do that. They do shout outs and plugs and they forget their spouse or partner to the end. I'm like, y'all don't want to get in trouble here on my show. So I love it.
I probably wouldn't get in trouble if I didn't, but she deserves it.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Jim. This has been great. For those that are listening, please follow the show or share this episode. Also, additionally, if you have any questions, it's 571-336-6560. That's 571-336-6560. Sharing positivity is a movement, and we're out. Thank you for listening to Positive Filter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity a Movement. Thanks for listening.